Hey folks, Takota Cohen here from buildingyourhomestead.com. Thanks so much for joining us on another one of our YouTube lives. Tonight we have the infamous Curtis Stone joining us in from his homestead property on a remote mountainside somewhere in British Columbia.
That's right.
Curtis, man, thanks so much for coming on the live.
Yeah, brother. Happy to be here. I'm just sharing the stream across my Twitter, Telegram, and YouTube. But yeah, happy to be here, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years. So the theme of tonight we had set up for was going to be talking about buying the right property. And I know you've got a just kick-ass course on Freedom Farmers right now. That's all about that. You've bought well, you just finished purchasing your own property. Is it three years ago? And you're
3 years ago, man.
4 years
Well,
ago?
actually, 4 years ago. I bought it September 2020.
Okay, right. You cashed in at the top of the market right before she hit the fan. So
Yes. Well, I sold my house. I did. I sold high and I bought low.
yeah.
I sold in an overvalued area and then I bought in an undervalued area. So
Yeah.
it was sweet.
So yeah, I'd love to get into just all your thoughts on how to buy the right property. Before we do that, I thought it'd be fun just to do a quick recap of your kind of personal journey into the homesteading and farming space. Your story arc is one of the most unique and I think inspiring of anybody that I know in the space right now, because you basically started out as like a punk rock musician in was it downtown Toronto or something,
Montreal.
and you were pretty much a leftist,
Mm-hmm.
and now you've kind of carved out. You're one of the leaders in the space. You've inspired just, I don't know, tens of thousands of people to leave and take on personal responsibility and start just doing cool shit, and you're just total crusher. So I thought it'd be fun to just start off tonight with your arc of why did you start getting interested in farming, homesteading? How did you get out of downtown Montreal and taking off your leather vest and studded
My leather
cufflinks?
vest. And I had a leather jacket. Yeah. Well, you know what to clarify, when I was in Montreal at that point, I wasn't a punk rock musician. My punk rock music days started when I was 16, when I was a skateboarder shithead, just doing dumb shit and skateboarding and getting in trouble. But by the time I was in Montreal, I was more of a jazz musician, where pretentious music, basically, like music that where you take yourself so fucking seriously. And I can make fun of myself now for what it was, but that's what it was. It would have been a Portlandia skit, because it was like we were so serious about playing in odd time signatures and just doing unconventional things that, we would love to have been playing. We used to say we were stadium rock for small venues. It was like, we weren't good enough to be Pink Floyd or something like that. But anyways, no,
what was your band name?
That band was called People for Audio when I was in Montreal. Yeah. And we put out a couple albums, and anyways, so I was doing that and I was serious about that. But yeah, at that time I was totally a leftist. At the same time though, I was still a truther, because during the earlier days of being into that, call it, even guys like Alex Jones were against George W. Bush. So the anti-establishment narrative when I was younger was more leftist. And I listened to punk rock bands like the Dead Kennedys, which got me into Noam Chomsky and stuff like that. So back in those days, leftism was anti-establishment. Now right wing is anti-establishment. But anyways, on a pointless journey of politics. But yeah, that's kind of, I was into that stuff. And actually, I was really in 2000. It was 2000. Kind of 2006, 2007, 2008. I was really starting to get burnt out on the lifestyle of living in a city and partying, and just like, I had quite a privileged experience living in the city, because I would go and work really hard in the bush in BC tree planting, and I would make a lot of money. I was like a highballer planter. So I would plant double what everybody else planted, and I'd make like $500, $700 a day. So I would go and just crank out two or 3 months of work in the early spring to midsummer, and then I'd go back to Montreal and I'd fucking just play music for the other 8 or 9 months, or yeah. And so I got to really take that seriously for a long time. But I also spent a lot of time going down rabbit holes, and I was, concerned about geopolitics and all that kind of shit. And yeah, I was tripping on the Mayan calendar back then, actually.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh man, fucking by 2012, I had this 5-year plan. Okay, so it was prior to 2012. What would 5 years? In 2007, I guess, I drafted this 5-year plan of how I was going to leave Montreal and then go and pursue this, like all the regenerative agriculture, permaculture, homesteading, you name it, off grid. And the first year of that plan was, I'm going to get on my bike and I'm going to ride my bike down the west coast of the US all the way down to Tijuana. And the plan was to do woofing, it was like willing workers on organic farms, that whole volunteer thing. And I did that. And anyways, that was the first year. And then the next year I'm like, okay, I was going to tree plant for 2 more years, and I was going to have this money saved and be able to, anyways, I don't need to go through the whole 5-year plan. But I had this plan, and I ended up achieving most of it, actually more than what I imagined, because I didn't even imagine that the plan would involve running a successful business, which was the urban farming enterprise. I just did that because I was like, hey, this is fucking cool. If I can at least make like some money doing this, I can do something else too, But it ended up making money, and then of course, doing that, I guess I was at the right place at the right time with urban farming, because and probably if I would have shut up, if I would have never said anything about the COVID show and the New World Order, I probably would be a multi-millions subscribers on my YouTube channel if I just played the YouTube game. But I couldn't help but calling out the bullshit. So, but anyways, I did that, and then I wrote a book about it, and fuck, I've done a lot of things. I've toured around the world promoting it and advocating for small scale farming, and been consulting for 10 years now and doing all kinds of shit. And today I'm privileged and fortunate enough to be able to, have a baseline career that I have income coming in constantly, which buys me the privilege to just work on my homestead, pretty much full time. And so that's what I'm doing now. I'm 3 years into that, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm hoping to be in my house, in our new house, before winter. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. And like, to me, that's just incredible. Cause like when you started that in, basically in 2007, it sounds like, you didn't, apart from planting trees, you didn't have any, farming or homesteading or, personal resiliency experience.
Literally none, not even knowledge. I mean, some knowledge. I was into, earth ships and stuff like that. And I had Bill Mollison's intro book actually back then. Okay. But I never took a PDC or anything like that. Like I wasn't really, I was just kind of figuring shit out. Like, wow, what can I do? Throw some shit at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah. And I love that. Cause like when you look at where you are now, like I'm sure everyone on the stream here is familiar with you and the work, and you got a gorgeous property now that you've, pretty much been, building yourself, or at least managing the build yourself. And like, you just you're a super skilled guy now. And to come from, not being born and raised on a property, or being born into this lifestyle and kind of carving out your own space, I think is just a huge inspiration for folks who are just getting into it now. It's like, in 10, 15 years, you could carve out your own space and be making a full-time living, somewhere in building the parallel society. And I think that is just it's one of the things I've been trying to highlight on these lives, is all the guests that I've been getting in are all entrepreneurs. They're all, they're not sitting at home bitching about how the world's going to shit. They're out building the world the way that it should be. And
that's just it. I was on Canadian Prepper's YouTube channel the other day. Nate, really connected with him, and met Dean from Arcopia too. I was in Saskatchewan. And getting on Nate's channel and kind of crossing into the prepper space, because the prepper space isn't quite the permaculture space, right?
No,
They
it's a bit different.
intermingle a little bit. But I look at the comments, and his videos get massive views. Like, this video's already got 200,000 views in a couple days. And but you look at the comments, and the prepper comments are so different than the permy comments. The prepper comments are like, "Don't homestead, we're all fucked anyways. Nuclear war is going to destroy everything." It's like, holy shit. If I lived with that, but it kind of speaks to even what you're saying about just dreaming it and doing it. Is if you live for fear of tomorrow, your hypothesis on how you think society is going to go might be wrong. And if it is, you wasted 10 years saying the world is going to end, but it didn't end. And I know, I even got sucked into it too with COVID. Yeah. Like, there was periods of COVID where I was like, this is fucking it, man. Like, the new world order is rolling it out. Like, this is hardcore. We need to hunker down and get ready for who knows what. Now I think it's going to be more of a long game. But you can, when you're doing these kinds of projects, you kind of get in your head too. Like, I've been sanding these rim boards I'm putting on this deck project I'm building by the pond right now. And you work out there and you get time to think, which I love, because when you're working on your land, man, it's the most rewarding thing, just to go out. Like, I've got a couple different big projects going on here right now. Construction of the house, which is really making leaps and bounds now. And I don't know, but a couple different landscaping projects outside, which I'm managing. The construction is other guys, and I'm involved a little bit. But, every day that I put in on my land, I see what you did. And it's so gratifying. Yeah. And how crazy is it, though, that in order to do that in today's world, you pretty much have to become somewhat economically autonomous, like I have become. So I've had to become an entrepreneur that had enough passive income to support being a fucking agrarian. Think about that. Think about how weird that is. Where it's like anywhere, if we were in like communist Russia, and you were just some agrarian peasants out just sticking it out to get through time, you'd be essentially doing the same thing I am. You'd have to put a little bit more into your daily sustenance probably too. But isn't it weird how that's kind of...
It is. So there's a couple of things you brought up there that I want to highlight that I think are really important. The first one is one of my mottos is that the only way to prepare for certain events is to prevent them from happening. And so, like, all of these prepper folks, like, we can't prepare for nuclear war or civil war or any of these really shitty events or
but only to a certain degree.
And that's but even that, like, if things get that bad, like if we have civil breakdown and no one's there to manage the nuclear power plants, like, it's game over. Like, there's so much.
Well, that's why I think nuclear war is just bullshit. Because there's so much downside that why would anybody even bother? I think
but not even nuclear war. Just like if shit gets bad enough that they're like the engineers aren't able to manage the nuclear power plants, like, they're spaced close enough around the world that, like, if shit gets unstable enough that we're not keeping our basic infrastructure in place, like, it'd be so bad that, in my mind, the only way to prepare for that is to prevent it from happening. Like, we need to rapidly be building the parallel system, educating ourselves, working in communities, finding ways to just stop that from even getting that bad. Like,
maybe to bring a bit more maybe to add a thought to what you're saying is that maybe it's more of to prevent it happening for you and where you are, or because you can't prevent, like, you and I have no capacity to prevent a civil war or to prevent nuclear holocaust, but we can move ourselves, position ourselves, and establish ourselves in a small network or community, right? So we can minimize it for ourselves in a way.
kind of, I guess, you've probably heard the aphorism. It's like, it's better to build a bigger table than a taller fence. Like, and I don't want to get, I'm not on the communist socialist fence, but it's like there's some of these problems that are just, they're so big. If even a fraction of what some of these prepper communities are concerned about happens, like there's just nowhere you could hide.
Yeah, right.
I don't think. And so that's where I'm getting at, is like the way to prepare for that is to do whatever we can to, and part of that will be, there are smaller events like, in Calgary right now, they're banning gardening because there's a water line break
In Calgary.
because
Calgary's
they're basically, so like that's like a localized event, and like, but there's things you can do you can prepare for that by, rainwater harvesting, basic things. But part of it's just the community outreach. Like, I think ideas, this gets to the second thing that you said I wanted to highlight, which is having the freedom to work and think, and just how rewarding that is. I think that's something that I was born and raised with, because I grew up in this kind of lifestyle, and I've just always had the time to read, to think, to just kind of step out of the system and learn just alternative ways of looking at the world. And I think that is really where a lot of this freedom lies, is in ideas. The future that I want to see, not everyone's going to be a homesteader or a farmer. Like, we're still going to need industry. We're still going to need specialization.
Of course.
In the transition period, it's great to have those skill sets. But if we can understand, the principles of freedom and the benefits of capitalism, not in the current form where it's corporatism,
capitalism,
but like just like free markets and those basic things, like those are ideas that aren't typically associated with homesteading, but I think are just as, if not more important than the vegetables and the chickens and the greenhouses.
Yeah, man.
But it's funny that those things are like a means to the end, which is like, once you get a little bit of self-sufficiency, or as Bill Mollison, so eloquently put it, is like, the reason why all revolutions fail is because they print more words and bullets than they do food and shelter, and they're fundamentally dependent on the systems they're trying to overthrow.
Yes.
And so for me, like, that's the core piece of like why I'm so passionate about homesteading and permaculture, is that it gives you that ability to bite the hand that was feeding you, so you can take a step back and really reimagine the world the way that it could and should be. And it's hard to do that when you're living paycheck to paycheck, and which is another thing that I wanted to highlight, which is what you said about, it's ironic that in order to be this kind of self-sufficient, you have to like start a business and make money, which I think is so important. And one thing you've just excelled at is finding ways to create value for huge amounts of people. And the there's a lot of backbiting that I've heard in the community, like homesteading space, around just anybody who's an influencer or making profit, who isn't just just doing subsistence farming. And I really don't like that mindset. And
it's bullshit.
It is. And so anyways, I just wanted to kick that off of just, I think the world of you, man. You've been a huge mentor for me for the last few years, and just super gracious with all the help you've given me. And it's just,
I appreciate that, brother. But it's about the mindset at the base of it.
Mhm.
And you're kind of speaking to that too.
Yeah.
Because in order to get freedom, and this is where, I've been kind of riffing on this freedom, liberty, prosperity thing, is that that's kind of become my passion, actually. And that's actually what I'm doing more and more now, of like kind of consulting for people in regards to getting freedom.
Yeah.
And freedom, you have to have a mindset to want to be free, because to be free, in my definition, or the definition, really, this is the definition I use, is that it's the ability to make a choice. So it's free to choose. It's like Milton Friedman said, you're free to choose. And so the freedom allows you to choose, and the choice should be to be self-determined and seek liberty. To be liberated is to be self-determined. And then liberation leads to prosperity.
Yeah.
And so this is all beginning at mindset, though, because in order get anywhere. You have to have the mindset to go for it. But and that's the kind of sad thing about a lot of folks today is people are fucking browbeaten with propaganda that is totally self-immolating. Like people are self-immolating. Our society is self-immolating. It's insane. And it's also crazy how fast it's changing. I mean, I've traveled a lot this year so far in the US, Canada, and Mexico, and I've seen a lot of people. And wow, especially Canada is changing. The demographics are shocking to me. I flew into Edmonton a few weeks ago. 100% employees were of every aspect of that airport were Filipino and East Indian. And then I went to Toronto, mostly just East Indian truck drivers, every franchise, like holy shit. But it's crazy because white people have fucking got lazy. Like people are lazy now. And that's the thing about mindset is like, look, our culture is disappearing fast, but you know what? We've been fucking the dog. People have been fucking the dog and taking it easy. And that's where that's why I like homesteading, is because I'm kind of tired of a lot of people, especially after the COVID show. Because that's when I left Kelowna. I was that's enough. 2 children. Didn't want my kids to be subjected to my neighbors turning into insane people, wearing masks and talking to us in masks, and just we left, and so that's what I like about homesteading is I'm out here adding value to my life. And this is the great thing about if you have a family, hopefully you get there, and you're still young though, so you got time. But that's the next element of homesteading. That's amazing is that, and it all comes to those, 8 forms of capital. Actually, I say there's 10, but family is one of the forms of capital. That's one I added family and health to make 10.
Okay.
So the health is like your zone negative or zone 0, right? But your family is an extension of you. And, when you're building a homestead, it's like part and parcel to have a family, because then there's legacy built into even the infrastructure of the homestead, right? And that's kind of how I'm designing the land on my farm, is to have sort of this idea I've been thinking on called a legacy farm, where the farm has many, it has different ways it can make money and provide value. And there's different seasons to that, and so just thinking about an enterprise that, the best place on a farm to have like young people is like working in the garden, the annual stuff, because it's go constant. The best place to have old people is doing the fruit trees, because you can be 80 years old thinning trees and doing stuff like that, and then the harvest is all at one end. Well, then you got the young people to come and do that. But starting to compartmentalize how my homestead is laid out in terms of thinking about where my kids will be at a certain point, that there could be an enterprise in there that they could fall into. Because I'm essentially hoping for the best and planning for the worst. I'm not saying that this is where I think society is going, but where I'm planning for my farm to be is 30 years of attrition. So the foundational design principle behind my homestead is 30 years of attrition. What do I have to do to be able to basically assume that I could stay here for 30 years and not bring out in any inputs? What would I do to survive, and how would we produce a surplus to add value to a place that we are in a community or something? That's kind of how I'm thinking about it. It's not that I'm going to flip a switch and that's all going to be here. That's a 30-year plan, or it could be. But kind of thinking about where all these parts are, and knowing too that nobody can be 100% self-sufficient. Not like you can for periods of time, but we need community, we need trade. And that's an important piece too. And that's also a big piece for me here is people in my community and the connections that I've made and the partnerships that I've built with people, and all part of the same piece, the social capital piece.
100%. Okay. So let's dive into the kind of buying the right piece of property. So, for you, the when you were starting to, or I guess given what you know now, say you're still living in the city, you still got your place in Kelowna, um, and or maybe you're going to go buy your second property. What
Okay.
what are the key factors, or what are the frameworks? What are the decision making processes that you're going to use, now, given the state of the world that we're living in, your goals? Because I think your goals are pretty typical for most people who are going to be in the space, wanting that family, that the legacy piece, the resiliency, all that stuff. Um, what would you do? Where do you start?
Yeah, maybe instead of me, because there's things that I do differently,
Yeah,
but the thing that I would advise people to look for or think about first is really thinking about their context, thinking
yeah,
about what you want and how do you think your life is going to look like when you get there on the land, and really come up with, I like, it's you use this yourself, list of negotiables and non-negotiables, right?
yeah,
So husband and wife sit down and lay out, well, what do I want? What kind of entrance do we want to the property? What kind of house do we want? What do we imagine ourselves doing there? How close do we want to be to the nearest town?
yeah,
So there's those things, the context things that gives you the that kind of focuses your lens for what
yeah,
you're looking for. Then the thing I do is, when you decide where you're going to start looking, you start looking for properties. The first thing I look for, and you do this too, is just to eliminate, look for threats.
yeah,
Just look for things on that property to eliminate them. And so this is where you get into, and I think the best way to look for property is in high velocity,
yeah,
or at least it is in. You need to, if you want to find a good property, you need to sample 100 basically. You need to
yeah.
really, not saying visit 100 properties, but
Yes.
sample 100, really look at them, get on Google Earth for each one, do all the photos, really look at them. And so in order to do that, you need a system to do it. And that's where kind of my workflow. So it's similar to what you and Rob used to talk about with like SWOT. What is it?
Yeah. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Right. So I just eliminated the other three because they come through my next part of the process. But I just look for threats first, and the
Yeah,
strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities come in the next
yeah,
part of it. So I just go through, your context, negotiables, non-negotiables, threats. Then I look at a property through the 11 scales of permanence,
yep,
going through each one, and then basically what we do is we actually created a matrix out of it by giving each 11 scales of permanence a score 0 to 4. 0 is perfect, and 4 is too much resources required. And each number just represents how many resources. So it's like when you're
yeah, yeah,
thinking about climate, is it a 0 or 4? It isn't necessarily about whether you like that, like whether it's a Florida versus Saskatchewan. Is that climate what you're looking for and what you're used to?
yeah.
And then its strengths and weaknesses are rated on the volatility of the weather and the predictableness of the weather, or high average wind speeds or things like that. So
Yeah,
I'd look at, I was just in Saskatchewan, and man, it's rough out there, like
pretty bleak.
regularly 50-kilometer, 60-kilometer winds, so I would rate that low, or give it a high score, I should say, on climate, which I would probably score at a three, maybe even a 4.
Yeah,
It's tough. And so when you go through all 11 scales of permanence with this system, I grade properties A, B, and C. So A properties are just total bangers. Usually they're worth more, right? Because if it's has value and all those things, people are going to recognize that, and so it's going to be worth more. And
yeah,
then B properties are good potentials. My property was a B property. Or C properties, which are like bargain properties, meaning that if it's a C, it requires a lot of resources to get it to the point where you can do something with it, right? Like an
yeah,
A property is pretty much just walk in, it's turnkey, everything there is as you need it. You don't have to add much, maybe a lipstick reno or something. But
Yeah,
a B property, you probably got to build a shop. You got to renovate the house. You might even have to build a house, So that's kind of how I think about it. I built a whole course on that. We go through, we look at 52, we do 52 evaluations. We've done hundreds of them now, probably even 1,000 now. But that's kind of my process.
Cool. So you want to dig into those 11 scale of permanence factors that you talked about there, and just give some examples of that'll kind of pique people's interest for what they should look for, and how that framework works in terms of hardest to change to easiest to change at the bottom.
Well, that's exactly it. That's what the 11 scales of permanence. I love them. I think I don't know if you're familiar with Walter Russell and or Nikola Tesla, guys that come up with ways of thinking about things super macro. And that's what I love about the 11 scales of permanence. I mean, I think really P.A. Yeoman was the real genius. He's sort of a Renaissance man, but then, is it Dave Jackie and Eric Townsmeyer? They added some, so they kind of fine tune them, which I like. But it's about hardest to change to easiest to change. And so at the top, it's climate, right? Because it's the most difficult thing to change. But it is something that people often don't think about. And one thing is, or a couple things people don't think about in regards to climate is, how often do you get abnormal weather? And that's just Google search statistical information. That's easy to figure out. And 2, what the average wind speed is. Or 3, what are average daylight hours? What does it look like in the winter? What does it look like in the summer? Those are things that you consider when you're evaluating climate. So that's one. Number 2 is landform, and people don't think about this all the time, and mostly because people mostly think about the house, because that's what realtors are trained to that's what they understand, right? Because the real estate's the real asset. It's the real estate. But that's, what is that on the scales of permanence? That's I've got it listed here. It's number 8. So for us, it's down there because all these other things are so much more important. So landform, I think, thinking about landform on what you're looking for in a property, you want to have some topography. I think topography is key. I don't know. You probably would agree with me too. Even for somebody who lives in a flat area, your property has some topography. And that's what makes properties dynamic and interesting. And it's the thing I love about the 11 scales of permanence is I also find that they intersect with each other. So for example, landform and climate and water and vegetation, wildlife intersect with microclimate, because all those things can create microclimates.
Yes.
Right. So, but landform, I like topography. I like different aspects, but I also like enough open area that, you got to have at least 5 acres of open area. You could be on a full quarter section, 160 acres. But if you don't have at least a 5-acre landing where you can just throw down most of your infrastructure in one consolidated place, it creates some, inefficiencies and disruptions in your chore path on your property, And my property has some challenges there too. Like my landform isn't perfect. It's not so flat and open, but it's fairly flat and open for how topographic it is. So it was good enough for me, And I've done a lot of earthworks, like my landform would have scored maybe a 3 on our scale, because I had to put quite a bit of resources. You've seen the amount of machine work I've done up here. It's insane. I've been running a 4.5 ton Kubota excavator and a skid steer up here for the entire time I've been here. So 3 years of machine work, and I'm on those machines every single week. Skid steer, I'm almost on every single day.
Wow.
So, and skid steer is mostly moving material, right? But I'm still running my Mini X because I'm using it to clear land and level things and such. But so that's what I like to see with landform. Landform that's just open and exposed, no trees, just like that sucks. You want stuff where you've got some shape and places you can have different zones and zones of use and things like that, that intersects. And for water, and maybe I'll talk about water, and then maybe you could interject if you want to. water these days, well, I've always been this way, but I think it's more important than ever, especially with the geoengineering and shit like that that's going on. Having a prime, I call it, it's not necessarily primary water technically, but a primary source that is directly from the earth. You know
Yes.
what I mean? That
Yeah.
is key. So I think a property should have at least two independent sources. So it could be a drilled well and rainwater catchment. It could be a runoff from a stream and a pit well. It could be, an agricultural water utility. That could be one. But a property should have two, and preferably two independent water sources.
Yeah.
And so for my homestead, I started with one. All I had was a culvert pit well. You saw it when you first came up here
Yeah.
in
And it
that
was
November.
dry for like 3 or 4 months of the year.
Yeah, so not useless for no,
Yeah.
it was dry. It's dry for like 7 months of the year.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I mean, this year probably it's been better.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, that's all that was there. So and the neat thing about that, water, thinking about how it all comes together in your property is that thing. They put that in a smart place because it's a riparian draw, right? That comes down. It's a big watershed that collects to an inflection point and moves down the property. And I have two of these draws on my property, and each of them moves probably 10 million liters of water a year. Oh, just from the snow melt. And that's not including the rain and the fall precipitation, but just the snow melt, it's a ton. So what I've added since then into that source is I've put two ponds in that draw. One is a reservoir pond that's up higher, and then one's a natural pond that was already there that I just took the material out. Then I drilled a well, 300 and something feet deep. But I've got 10 GPM, pretty much limitless. I can pump it all 24/7, just keeps coming. And then I've set up rainwater catchment. So now I've got rainwater on all the buildings, off the house, the garage, the greenhouse here, all collecting to one point. And so, I don't know. That's some thoughts on those three, at least.
Yeah. Wild. I just have a personal question with that. Where you built your other pond there, it was above that wet well, like the culvert well that you had. Are you finding that that's starting to stay charged up more now? Is there any subsurface percolation that's filtering in there, or is
that whole thing's been a total disaster?
Oh no.
That reservoir pond has been a total disaster. It's basically just I'll tell you what I'm going to do next, but that's not working. But the natural pond that was already there, it was just so full of sediment. I basically just took out the sediment and kept that pond as it was. That pond is crushing. And that's where I've built this dock, this wicked deck. I just fell a tree, built up 4 pads with rocks and sand and gravel, and then put those logs across and then just put I-beams through it. And I've built this badass deck that's floating in the forest. It's fucking cool. Anyway, so that pond has turned out to be a gem that I didn't think it would be. So, but yeah, no, the top pond just leaks like crazy. Like I can't hold it at all. At first I tried the most inexpensive process, which was to buy this polymer product called Damn It. Totally didn't work, but that might not be a testament to the product. That might just be a testament to how leaky my pond is there because it's all fractured rock. So it's like, I need to so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to double the size of it. I'm going to take out the center. Did you see it? Were you there when I had the culverts in? Okay. So, the dam, there was the main dam and then the culverts went through the dam and you said, let's do that second spillway there. I'm going to keep that dam there, but where it turned to go up into the high ground, we're going to open that up and just bring widen out that dam to the next rock so that that pond now becomes the catchment pond, and then it'll catch there and spill over into the next one. And so it's going to be probably another $10,000 of work or more. But then I'm going to just there's a guy who has a bentonite clay pit close to me.
Oh, really?
Where I can just get truckloads of bentonite clay.
Wow.
And so I'm just going to go fucking balls to the walls. So let's try to seal this puppy, because a liner, I mean, if I wanted to do a liner, I'd have to do the bentonite clay anyways, because it's just fractured rock.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't throw a liner over that. Maybe you could throw sand over, but you might as well throw clay over it. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. Cool. No, so I'm on 100% with everything so far. We got climate, landscape, water. What are the next ones in your framework?
So invisible structures, which I just call socioeconomics. This is one that's totally undervalued, especially today, because the social and political and economic stuff of today is so crazy that it's more important, because you have to think about, if you're going to move somewhere that's not in the area that you've been living in, you're going to go out and frontier a little bit. You want to know about a place that you're going to go, especially if you're going to spend a significant amount of time there. To some degree, you want to know what people are like. You want to know what the crime rates are like. You want to know what are the cultural demographics of that. You want to know, and why Curtis, you're a racist. You want to know what the cultural demographics are? Yeah, because I would rather live in a place where there's more people who look like me. That's what everybody on earth wants to do. So yes, cultural demographics are important. And you want to think about those things, because, man, since the COVID show, so many people got woke. Like, you don't want to, think about, okay, here's an example for our American compatriots. Think about a place like Washington State. Okay. So the socioeconomic breakdown of Washington State is the whole Western, call it 70% of it, it's either really left wing or the climate sucks. You get to, Seattle, Tacoma, all the way down to Portland, the straight line is extreme left-wing politics. And that only matters in so much in that, because there's more physical government infrastructure there, it therefore has more of an effect on your life. You use the infrastructure. You're involved with the bureaucracy. I say to people, there's a direct correlation between concrete and tyranny. More concrete, more tyranny. So totally. Basically, right? No, like literally, right? Okay, literally, highways, interstates, buildings, infrastructure, parking lots, malls. Where the money goes, the policy flows. This is what I say to people, especially in the law stuff that I do these days, is that's how you got to think about it. So if you want to be in a place that has more money, there's benefits to that, right? Because the roads are nicer. Maybe the hospital is more readily available if you need it. The grocery stores might be better, so on and so forth. The hardware stores are better. However, it comes with it more potentially onerous and draconian bureaucracy, which can get in the way and get annoying. And so it's this, okay, how do you rate the socioeconomics of a place? That's one way to think about it. And there's, go on about it a bit more, but that's kind of food for thought for me when I'm thinking about those invisible structures, is like, what's going on in the area? How woke is it? But anyways, going back to Washington State though, is northeastern Washington, which is kind of right below the area that I live in, southern British Columbia, is super conservative, super just families, farms, homesteaders. Great. The politics of it don't matter as much because there's less concrete. Okay. So Spokane's the biggest city in that area, but area I'm even talking about is north, like Colville, Republic. Those are some of the cities in that area. Kettle Falls, totally good old farm boys. Does not look like the general politics or general cultural aspect of the rest of Washington State. So, food for thought when you're thinking about a place you want to live, and you can break it down anywhere with that. But basically, I want to avoid in socioeconomics, I want to avoid major metropolitan areas, because the general constituency has an extreme resemblance to your average Walmart shopper. Right? Yeah. So think about, and if you want to know what, get an image, like think about those viral videos where it's like Atlanta, Georgia, total. That is like thug life central, Black Friday sale. People are literally kicking the shit out of each other for a fucking plasma TV, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to live anywhere near a place like that, because the average individual, if they're willing to go to violence that early in the socioeconomics
Yeah.
of today, think about what it looks like with 3 days of starvation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's, anyways, I could go about on socioeconomics is a rabbit hole because it ties to all
Totally.
these things. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, I say a couple things: where the money flows, the policy goes, and the correlation between concrete and tyranny.
Yeah.
And so that's what it comes down to. So when I say where you live, in the high ground, in the trees, away from the shitty cities.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's tough because, or not tough, like the the more infrastructure, like you said, like the more concrete and the more services that are available, the more it attracts people who don't want to provide those things for themselves and just want to be, taken care of by, mommy and daddy government. And so the flip side of that is like if you want to get away from that, it requires you're gonna
Means
talk
you
a
got to
bit.
step up.
Yeah, you got to step up and talk a bit about some of your like you plowing your own road. Like you basically take your life in your hands a couple times a year during some of your big snowstorms because no
That's
one's
right.
going to come do that for you.
And that's what it is. So that's the freedom and responsibility, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah. But anyways, maybe we'll stay on track with the scales, because
Hey.
you and I could riff on this one all fucking night, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so the next one that is so often overlooked with people looking for homestead is your access, and then of course the circulation in the
Yeah.
property. Access is huge, and this is where people get, especially in British Columbia or topographical areas like BC, anywhere along the Cascades, BC, Oregon, California, parts of Montana, parts of even Wyoming, parts of Colorado, even through Nevada and such. We have topography. And so access, this is where your landform intersects with your access, is that more topography creates challenges in your access. This is where you guys in the flats have it really good, is that you got all kinds of access. That also provides downside too, in terms of strategic defendable positions. And when you're thinking about that too, and that was part of my strategy thinking about my property, is I wanted high ground that I could basically defend a position. And so, access is a challenge for me. And this is where, but people fuck it up when they buy a property. They think, oh, raw land in BC. The only way to buy affordable property in BC is buy raw land. Yes, it's true. You could buy, call it 2 acres with a home and a shop in most parts of southern BC, $1 million, completely ridiculous, and hardly a half decent house. But then you go and buy a piece of raw land, 20 acres, 300 grand. Oh, whoa, steal of a deal. But your access is gnarly, and you got to get in with chainsaws, and then you're doing machine work and many stages of machine work. You spent 80 grand on a driveway just to get access, and then another 100 grand in materials to make it nice. Like fortunately, my driveway was cut when I bought this property, but there was no culverts and no ditches. So it was during the 2 parts of the year where that matters, it sucked. And so I had to fix those issues, put in culverts, and then I've spent 80 grand on just material to make my driveway so it's not dusty the whole way, or I get ruts or shit like that, right? Packed it, and it takes a lot of maintenance. But access is one that people don't really think about. And then again is the circulation. And you see this all the time in your consulting, is like you look at somebody's property and you go, well, why the hell did you put that building there? It makes no fucking sense. You know what I mean? Something like that, where how you move around the property. And this is a challenge for me and on my property too, is like I had good enough access. It required some upgrading, and I had okay circulation, but it's challenging because my property, the way it was shaped, I couldn't just do which is optimal, is to have a turnaround driveway, right? In your main access to where your home is, wouldn't you agree that that's like the best thing?
Yeah. That's one of the first things I put on my new properties to turn around, because
Turnaround driveway.
at my
That's what you want.
my parents' farm, we have to like back down quite a long ways. And it's just constant stress of, are we going to run over a kid or a dog, or
Yes.
back into something? Like it's just it's a type 1 error, in my opinion.
It is. And so the challenge for me on I do have a turnaround driveway now technically, but it's not as great as it could be, because to have a really effective turnaround driveway, you want to have it in a center point where you can have infrastructure all around it, right? All of your buildings, processing facilities, barn, feed shack, chicken barn, you name it, is all there. Boom. My topography made that impossible without unimaginable amounts of earthworks and smashing rock, right? It's just not possible. So I did the best I could. And, in that solar panel area, now it's a big landing. It's not level, but it's open and I can turn around there. But my infrastructure kind of lines the entrance to that turnaround. That's where all and which is quite okay. Because then I have one chore path that's mostly based around my finished house. My chore path on where I live in the cabin isn't ideal, but I was willing to have that suck for the first little while until I built my house. And I've got this really sweet, optimal chore path out one way, chore path out the other way, right? 180 degrees from one another. But yeah, those are things that people often overlook too.
Yeah. And most roads are built in the wrong place. They're usually built in valleys. Which is where valleys is where water is concentrated.
Exactly.
So they're wet and they get, washed out all the time. The best place is either on a ridge line, or you're going on contour, because then it can be turned into a water harvesting feature.
Exactly.
And then most infrastructure is placed where there's a view, which wherever there's a view, there's wind, there's a bunch of other challenges with that. So it's I couldn't agree more. Access is massive. And you think about it, I would rather buy, to your point about it's not necessarily going to be any cheaper to buy, raw land versus a house the property that already has buildings on it, but it will be cheaper if those buildings and roads are put in the wrong place in the long run, because of
that's a good point.
And so the buildings, I think this is the next one on your list, is they are a massive liability. They can be, they're the most important piece of infrastructure on your property, the most expensive thing you're going to own probably. But if they're not in the right amount of the right thing at the right time in the right place, they're going to cause you headaches for the rest of your life.
Exactly. So on the scales of permanence, actually buildings are number 8. So we just did access. So at least according to how Dave, Jackie, and I kind of agree with this. Like they got buildings infrastructure number 8. I agree with that to a certain point. I mean, you could debate any of the the obvious ones
my
are
framework's
climate,
a little
land,
different.
and water.
Yeah.
But anyways, so vegetation and wildlife is next, and this is something that's overlooked too. People don't think about the property in terms of the trees. Really, for me, it's trees. Wildlife is great, but for this, I'm just looking at the biological capital, like what's there, the vegetation, the trees, the grass, the health of the trees, the look of the plants, all of that. And it's overlooked in the sense that people are house centered, they're just thinking about things that are in and around the house. And so people don't often think about trees, and having trees on your property is a massive, massive piece for microclimate, but just lifestyle. Like I've got this 2-acre forest area that we've cleared, and I've spent months on this thing, chipping away at it. I've had help too. My brother-in-law comes and helps me clear land and stuff. And it's a park. Like it is. What we've done with this thing is such a massive lifestyle thing for my kids, thinking that my kids have a fucking park they can go to anytime they want. like boom, it's a park. You're in tall trees. The ground is all cleared. You're not tripping on shrubs and stuff. We've basically just mowed it all down, but and leveled it out really tastefully. And it's amazing. I mean, and like in the summer too, because our climate, like this type of boreal climate, zone 5, it gets fucking hot in the summer. I don't want to be in the sun. And so to have a place to go and just boom, it's so cool. There's a body of water there. It's heaven. And not only that, it's also a resource, right? Because as you know, trees are a massive resource. And you gave me the saying, they take a lifetime to grow and an afternoon to take down, right? Love that.
Totally. And people, like, there's almost no amount of money you can buy to get like a full grown forest. Like
you can't buy it.
No matter how rich you are, you can't
Yep.
buy that.
Nope.
It's going to take 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
And so versus, if you buy a property that already has that, and then you just carve out, ideally, like you said, there already is a, 3 to 5 acre clearing that's already done. But if not, that's literally an afternoon, couple $1,000 with a mulcher or a hoe or something.
Yep.
And
you know what it makes me think about is my ideal piece of land is, let's just cap it at a quarter section, 160 acres. My ideal piece of land looks like it's 160 acres and 150 of it is trees. Literally is trees and just wild. And then there's 10 acres. That could be, you could divide that 10 acres into a zone 3, 2, 1. So you say really there's only 2 to 2.5, 3 acres total landing area. That's your turnaround driveway, your infrastructure, primary buildings, energy grid, all that stuff. And then the next, 4 to 6 acres could be area for trees and agriculture and bed blocks and stuff like that. And the last 2 acres is bleeding into the forest. But that's like, when I think about vegetation and wildlife, going back to that, that's what I think about is like, what is that ideal type of property? Now, the cool thing about what I just said about a property is you can take that same 160 acres and get rid of 140 of those acres. Take the property down to 20 acres. And if you had that same property surrounded by crown land, you almost have the same thing.
That's true.
Or state land. And so you can kind of take a big, baller, 100, I want a quarter section, and shrink it down to 20 and go, you know what? You could do like a good home. And you could, especially in a boreal climate, you can be out thinning out trees and stuff on the back roads and stuff for a lifetime. I can taking deadfall and stuff like that. I can literally do that. I mean, I can do it for a lifetime on my property because I have about 35 acres of standing timber. Which is kind of like, full of shrub and shit too, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I've never done the math on it, but like my little piece that I bought, like it's mostly open land, but there was like an old shelter belt planted around the house. And I did a bit of clearing to open up the space a bit, and I've cut some other trails. Like in a, I don't know, maybe a month's worth of work, like I have 5 years worth of firewood.
Yeah.
Like, and like I even on my place, which has very little, like it's surprising how little timber you need to get yourself, 10, 15 cords of wood or whatever you're going to need for a year.
Man.
It doesn't take much.
It doesn't take much. I love firewood, man. I'm geeking out on it hard now too, because I've got the stove that Ben Falk.
Oh, you did? Okay.
But I got the one that's a bit little ballsier than his, actually. It's called the Elda, and it's one step up. The stove chamber is just a little bit bigger, and the oven chamber is a little bit bigger. It can take like a full size turkey.
Okay.
Man, these stoves are badass. The one thing, and so going to the firewood piece is that I'm building my homestead out to be the most ultimate redundancy. Yes, I'm off grid. I've got a big fancy badass off grid power system, 20 kilowatts of solar, 13 kilowatt diesel generator. I've got, a pretty sweet system, but what if there's an EMP that somehow knocks out, because you can't fully it's difficult to fully proof a system because the solar panels have to be outside, and how do you shield them? Anyways, there's ways to kind of do it, but you always want to assume that you could lose it all. And so in my homestead design, I've designed my house around this kitchen wood stove that at the ultimate redundancy, I'll be able to heat the home, cook, and heat domestic hot water with one stove. And then I've got to have a manual pump. So because I have now a rainwater catchment and snowmelt catchment system on my house, because I've put snow rails, and my roof is one slope, and it's rated for a massive amount of snow. So I've set it up so I can just hold the snow all winter. Those rain gutters are just filling with snow all like shoulder season constantly. So I'll be able to have, because if I don't have electricity, I can't pump water from my main well, right? Because that well needs like 2 kilowatts to pump. So I can't do it. And I could go to a bucket and pull out from my pit well, but with this system, I'm going to have, because the rainwater, I'll have this manual pump that's in the basement in my utility room. That's a primed line connected to a cistern that's all rainwater catchment. So literally with no electricity, I'll be able to go out, pump that water to charge the pressure tanks in the house, and then I can run water for maybe 20 minutes to do some dishes, take a shower, and whatever. So that's kind of, again, but that's speaking to vegetation on a property and trees, is that because I've got a lifetime of firewood and I'm surrounded by crown land on two sides, that I've got, firewood, limitless resource. And in a cold climate, it's crucial. If you're living down in Louisiana, firewood isn't as important, but up here it's life.
Yeah. But I think no matter where you live in the world, like the other benefit for trees is, shade and shelter. And like we did, one of our last live streams was, with a guy named Austin Ulrich, he does like silvopasture designs in the Pennsylvania area, where he's like putting trees out in pastures for livestock. It's a really great presentation. And he just details all the studies about how important shade is for livestock or for improving pastures.
Yes.
Or in our area, like the wind and the prairies is just so brutal. Like, you can reduce your winter heat requirements for your buildings or your animals by 20% just by giving them shelter.
Yeah.
And then, they're just 20 minutes before the call started, we just had I bet you it was 100-kilometer winds that just came out of nowhere. Like it was just a crazy, I'm surprised it bullshit away. And we get that every couple of weeks. And I'm looking at my poor fruit trees, and thank God my garden is just barely out of the ground this year. It would have ripped everything out.
Dude.
And in 2 more years, I'll have my shelter belt trees will be up. But again, those are things you can't, no matter how much money you have, you can't buy that. And so it takes time. And once it's there, it's great. And I've got that shelter, and at my parents, or my main farm, we've been planting 30,000 trees since I was a kid. And now it's at the point where even with those brutal winds, we've got our gardens are protected. They're fine, but it's a ton of work and a ton of time to get to that point. And it doesn't take much for.
I don't know how you guys do it, frankly. I don't know. I when I was out in Saskatchewan, I toured around a bit, and I'm just going, God, it's just so cold, and it's so fucking windy.
I couldn't do that. Or ours is for the most part, it's really nice. There's just those odd, days, random days that we'll get brutal stuff. But down in Lethbridge, or anywhere you see a wind turbine, don't buy.
Yeah. Exactly. That's absolutely true. So next one on the scales of permanence is microclimate. And now we're getting into stuff that's less critical, but microclimates are important if you want to have some type of variation in your property for agricultural purposes, right?
Yep.
Number one, and two, maybe lifestyle. Microclimates help you hold water, right? Because they can shade the body of water,
Yep.
and that all comes from topography too, right? For the most part, microclimates come from topography. They come from topography and vegetation, essentially, really, an
Yeah.
aspect, to some degree. But I've got tons of microclimates on my property. I've got, one, two, maybe three different types of experiences on my property, and of course, lots of different aspects.
Yeah.
North, I got every aspect because I'm on a ridge into a valley.
Do you have one of those like temperature guns, like the laser guns?
No, I'd like to get one of those though.
You should get one and go for a walk some evening, like in the spring and in the fall, like
Yeah.
just as the sun's setting. Like it would blow your mind that like the temperature range that you'll find, in the low pocket where the frost pools, or
Yep.
on the west facing slopes. Like one of my favorite things to do is just go for a walk in those kind of swing seasons and
Yes.
notice microclimates. And I've done that for years, but I recently got one of these laser things. And so now when I go for a walk, I'm just constantly taking readings as I'm just walking around.
I want one of those for my firewood too, to be able
Yeah.
to see how
Oh
hot the
yeah.
fire is.
Well, you'll
Um,
need to get a really good one, because I got it's like a $300 one, and it won't even go as hot as those JA Rubby stoves go. It maxes it out.
oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah. In the firebox anyways.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But well, no, that's it. It is fascinating, and I mean, for me, the cool thing about my property is I experience the microclimate really viscerally,
Yeah.
because my main area where at least my agriculture and my greenhouses is on my southeast aspect. So I've got
Yeah.
these terraces that step down facing southeast, and
Yeah.
southeast in a Canadian climate is ideal because
Yes.
southeast means maximum light in the early time of the day when you need it most, coming out of a
Yeah.
cold night to warm up quick.
Yeah.
And it also gives reprise in the afternoon in the summer in the boreal climate, which is hot and dry and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So the thing that's cool for me is my southeast is where all my ag is, and then on the other side of that is where my forest is. And it's so cool too. Actually, my neighbor just logged a strip behind my property, which is, I guess, my northwestern side. So now I've got this wicked fire break there, but it's really cool because the sun now sets behind the trees. And so we're in this pond area, and it's
Cool.
fucking cool, man. The sun's setting through the forest, and so it's really amazing because you go outside at say 4 o'clock now, it's getting hot. You go into the forest, it's
Yeah.
20 degrees. It's got to be 20 degrees cooler
Easily. Yeah. Yeah. And
because it'll be 35 degrees out there and 15 degrees in the trees, and you're like, whoa, man. I love it. Yeah. That's the kind of shit though that really makes a property magical.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's where you get, I don't know. So much of my context right now is thinking about the memories that my children are going to have growing up here.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, and aesthetics and experience, which is the last one, which we'll do, but it ties into this though, is that you think about memories and just the power of a moment, and to experience, it's like all the in the different senses, like what makes a moment or an experience really special. It's when multiple things that you're sensing change. So it's like if you're just watching a screen, you're just experiencing light and sound. But when you're outside, when you experience the microclimate effect of wind, temperature change, humidity, sound, like a full experience different from one to the next, of a juxtaposition. That's
smell.
a fucking experience.
It is. Yeah, totally.
And so I think about how cool that will be for my children. Because when I think about things in my life, those are the moments that I remember the most. Where an experience was all consuming. And isn't it ironic today too, in that where we are is what the establishment society would like the average individual to do is have the lowest setting of experience. So the least amount of visceral things experienced in the five senses, right?
Yeah.
Just fucking plug you into a machine and eat your bug bar.
Yeah.
You know?
VR goggles, and if you start to feel too much, here's a pill that'll just make everything go gray.
Yeah, exactly. But so anyways, that's microclimate, man. And that's what I'm so glad, because my property was lacking in access and circulation. It was lacking in buildings, infrastructure, and it was lacking in soil. Those are my biggest challenge, and water too. But because like I saw the microclimate when I was here, that I was like, man, I want to have these special zones that are so different that I can do all these different types of things. And so that's where I'm glad I kind of weighed those things out. And that's why I say to people, like we said at the beginning, like I say this to, if I'm working with somebody on, what's going to be their context for a property and what does that property look like? It's that negotiables and non-negotiables and your context, which crafts your thinking about how you're going to experience all these things.
Yeah. One little metric that I found just super valuable. It was in one of the early food forest design books I read years ago by Martin Crawford. And he said that for every 1 degree your land faces south, you gain 2 days of growing season. And it's
a metric. For every 1 degree
that faces south, you gain 2 days of growing season. And it's like cool. It checks out for I'll just give you an example of that. Is like in our climate, and you're probably about the same as us. We have about 115-day growing season, right?
I got way more than that, but yeah,
you've got more than okay.
So, way more, and it's probably because of the aspect.
Totally, and you're high up. But if you get one of those thermometers, or you go for a walk in the evening in the swing seasons, like right when you're like our first frost is our last frost is like May 15th. Our first frost is September 15th. And so like if you can find a spot on your property that skips, the first 2 or 3 frosts and the last 2 or 3 frosts, you've increased your time but you've increased your growing season by like 20%.
Yes, but then think about that compounded over time.
Yeah, exactly.
And you think about growing trees, because trees take 10 years, right, to get up there.
Yeah. But even there's that, but also then now you can start expanding. If you're in a zone 3 or 4 and you're getting into 130, 140-day growing season, that's in this microclimate. Like I'm growing black walnuts in one of the microclimates on my farm, and I think I need to check, but I think this is the first year I'm going to have nuts, and like it's hard to grow those in our area. Or I had mulberries and honey locust, and I'm trying pawpaws. Like I'm finding these microclimates on my property where I think I'm going to have the longest season extension, because I'll go out, in the swing seasons, and around my house where I have the best microclimate, it'll be 6, 7, 8 degrees Celsius, and then I'll walk 100 feet out away from my microclimate and it drops down. It'll be freezing the exact same time. And so that just expands your growing season. It now you can have, vegetables a couple weeks earlier. You can grow longer things. Your trees are going to grow more. Again, like think about, like, I don't know what the square footage cost for a greenhouse is, even like a cheaper one, but it's not cheap. And so if you think about being able to find like an acre or even like a few thousand square feet of a microclimate, think of that as like a greenhouse or some kind of a cold frame that you're basically getting for free if you buy the right property that has. And then it gets fun because you start planting, trees and managing them. Like I've got spruce trees around my house, and I prune them in such a way that they actually hold. They're like a frost canopy,
right?
And so I'll go out, like even when we get a hard frost, there'll be no frost underneath my spruce trees because they're just radiating the heat and holding it down on the ground.
Yeah.
So you can do some really cool stuff. Or Sepp Holzer's just a master of this.
He's a master of that in Switzerland and his crazy property. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. Yeah, one guy in the comment there said walk barefoot. Totally, that's
Yeah.
something too. And you know what? That's actually what I'm trying to do on my property because it's actually really difficult to walk barefoot on my property on the native
Yeah.
ground here because it's
Yeah.
fucking rocky and sharp.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like your place. And
No.
so, but what this is where I've just used massive amounts of sand. Like I've probably brought 50 or 60 loads of sand up here in the 3 years that I've been
Wow.
building this property. I get $350 a load. And
Yeah.
but it's great because walking on packed sand is quite nice and you really feel grounded. Like it's like I've
Yeah.
done that
Yeah.
in my greenhouse here, packed sand. So in the winter we can get out and just walk barefoot on the ground, which is a nice thing to be able to feel in the winter. You know, our winters are long. They're not quite as long. Like I actually reckon we get about 180 growing days. Um,
Really?
yeah, because
Oh,
I don't get a frost until the end of October.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
but this year and in the 3 previous years that I've been up here, I reckon I'm a zone 5 actually at my lowest temperature, going by my
Wow.
lowest temperature. But no, I mean like the 3 years I've been up here, I don't get my last frost is like first or second week of April. And then my first frost has been every time end of October. That's been consistent. The thing that's been unique about this winter is the snow melted early. It was all gone in mid-February. Then a bunch came back a couple days later, but it melted right away. I thought it was going to be a really early spring, and it was an early end of winter. But it was just you had the same thing. Everybody
It's
on Western,
cold.
actually everybody in Canada had the same experience.
Cold.
Fucking long and drawn out cold spring, which was
Yeah.
weird. And I recorded a frost. I record my frost dates, and this one was in. It was totally anomalous. Where the fuck is it? It was somewhere in. It was in late May or something.
Wow.
I don't see it. Which is oh yeah, light frost May 30th. We had our last
Oh,
frost this year was May 30th. That's crazy. And people in this area I know who've been here for 30 years say that's the first time they've ever seen that ever.
yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
weird.
That one frost could be enough to knock back some of your fruit trees and
And it
you know
did.
worst,
It did.
best it would just you just
Fucking
lose a
sucks.
year's worth of fruit, but it
Yeah,
might have killed a bunch of them. You might lose
and
them.
it might have killed them too. Actually, I out of my food forest, because I did my syntropic food forest, 450 trees.
Wow.
75% are the S1, S2, S3s, right?
Yeah.
But I lost a good amount of my emergent trees. Like I think
Really?
maybe 5 or 6. They're
Even
just
on that
dead.
even on that slope, like because of the frost, you mean?
You know what? I don't know if it was the frost or just some of these trees didn't take. And
Yeah.
I planted everything at the optimal time. Like I got everything in early. I got everything in before it started emerging.
Yeah.
And some
Funny.
trees, I mean, it was the bare root. Some of the bare root stuff just didn't. It just
Oh, shoot.
you got a few plum trees, just nothing. But mostly, all in all, it's looking good. The one thing I should have fucking listened to you early on is I didn't seed my ground cover early enough, and now I'm just fucking weeds. And
Yeah.
I'm managing it, and I'm just gonna. I think what I'll probably do. I don't know. You tell me. What should I do? I got clover. Should I
Yeah.
just mow it down real low and then just seed clover in there and just kind of hope that the clover will establish in between? And
What are the weeds you're dealing with?
because I don't want to till it, I can't
No.
till it now. It's too shaped. The only weed that I don't like is that shitty thistle, not Canadian thistle, but just some people call
Oh,
it devil's lettuce.
globe thistle. Is that the one?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I
Yeah.
think it's common.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like a dandelion for a bit, but then it's not. Look in my
Oh,
photo.
is it milk thistle?
Yeah, I think is it milk thistle? I'm gonna look in my picture, this app that you got me using.
Um,
It's a
I mean,
type of thistle. It's because of
yeah.
lack of calcium.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I would just keep mowing it, keep it down short. I mean, the clover doesn't take very much to grow. Like I would if you can't tell, throw the clover down, put some mulch or something on top of it, and then seed, then mulch, and then the clover will come through, and you can just keep mowing everything until
Seed, then mulch. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to find it.
it really benefits from having some kind of seed to soil contact. And if you can keep it irrigated, just to get it
Oh,
the head start.
it's irrigated, dude.
Yeah.
My ear. This is the one thing that I've got pretty fucking dialed on my
Yeah.
homestead that I've done right is my irrigation systems are pretty awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been a non-stop expense. Like I'm
Yeah.
probably not including the drilling of my well and the infrastructure for that. I'm probably 20 grand on just irrigation and moving water up here.
Yeah. I believe
And
it.
I think that's probably not even including my cisterns, which costs 4 or 5 grand.
Yeah.
It's the real deal. And this is the deal. But you know, because I'm boreal, fire risk,
Yeah.
my water's fucking critical. And so it's critical for growing, but it's more critical for fire defense. And so that's kind of been my strategy on here. But yeah, irrigation. So the food forest is sweet because in my beds, you know, that run mostly on contour down that southeast slope, there's a drip line on each row of trees, and then there's a wobbler emitter line
Okay, you did
every
that. Yeah, yeah.
I think 3 meters.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You
And
do
so
everything.
it just like it's in 2 zones. It just waters everything very evenly, and I love it. And so
Yeah.
I've got the ability to manage the ground cover. I should have just seeded that clover before and
Yeah.
got ahead on the weeds, because clover, it's actually because another thing a problem I have here is because I have to do a lot of terracing, I get these banks on the low side,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if I don't completely rockscape them, which is good to do, but also can sometimes be hard to do. If I don't totally rockscape them, they erode. And my fucking chickens, which they don't do it anymore, but for a while they were getting in there and tearing it down. So anyways, I've seeded clover over these things
Yeah.
and watered the piss out of them. And man, it's sweet.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
completely covers these banks.
Yeah.
And then you don't get any erosion. And then I got this one that's kind of a vulnerable little spot. My kids keep climbing up, and I don't climb on the bank. But I've got some parts of it that are so established with clover that they can literally run up it now, and it doesn't erode the bank.
Okay. Yeah,
So
yeah.
white dwarf clover, man, it's really good for establishing, you know, because I've got porous soil, you know, that's
Yeah.
my soil type is porous.
Yeah.
And so I just can't hold on to water at all. And so I need to just like, boom, get so much vegetation on there that it's going to hold it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We must be, are we on
Building
structure?
infrastructure. That's the
Yeah.
next one. So, I mean, this one probably I won't spend any time really talking about a house because that's a whole rabbit hole. But I would say for infrastructure and other buildings on a property, what I like to see, I'm sure maybe you'd have something to add to this, but what I want to see, like on a perfect homestead, I want a shop like with a high bay, right? So you can do guy shit. You can pull out a motor.
Get a
And I don't
tractor.
have that yet, which I kind of do with my Quonset, but it's not really.
Yeah.
I want to build another shop, but I want a shop. I want a barn. I want a place to put feed, and I want like a greenhouse, and I want good, fencing infrastructure around the most important area. I want some gates. That's what I like to see for buildings and infrastructure on a homestead.
Yeah. Yeah. I would second that. Getting a shop should be one of the first buildings that goes up.
It should be the first building. And it was for me. It just wasn't enough. And because my topography was so limited, I couldn't build a big enough shop, but whatever. I'll build another one.
Yeah. And then I guess with a barn, I'm kind of moving away from with the barn thing. I want to keep my animals out of fixed infrastructure as much as possible, just because there's just so labor intensive to clean. It's like I'm going with just mobile coops, mobile pig shelters, my corrals. You can tear them apart. Like I spent too much time shoveling barns out of shit when I was a kid.
Shit.
And so like I either want them to be on pasture, or I can get a tractor, a skid steer in, or a little.
Who's the animal? Who's the guy shoveling shit, right?
Yeah.
Who's the animal?
Who's
No, I
working for
agree.
who?
I agree. But that doesn't work with cows, though. Really, cows have to have a place to winter over, right? Or no?
We have I have my milk cows out in that -50, no problem, no barn.
But where do they sleep?
And straw, like in a covered shed, but the shed's
sheltered area, though, right?
Yeah. So like there's wind protection, and you get some kind of a shelter, and then put lots of straw in.
Yeah.
And then in the springtime, I can move all that shit around. I can get in there with equipment, clean it out. That's just and you can do that on a small scale, even if you got a subcompact tractor. But just designing it so that it's people, like with my 6 milk cows and 30 pigs and 150 chickens, we produced enough compost in that system to cover like 20 acres of land with like a decent amount of compost. Like we were using probably over 1,000 pounds of straw a week, and it wasn't enough carbon to absorb all their manure over the winter time. Like if another framework is like if your corrals, your animal systems smell bad, it means you're losing fertility. You're losing fertility
because you're creating shit that's anaerobic.
Yeah, and you're smelling the ammonia, which is the nitrogen, which is evaporating. And so that's my model. Is like my farm has like if it smells bad, put straw down, put carbon down, wood chips,
put down carbon, absolutely.
Whatever it is.
So I agree on the mobile, and it's, I only do 3 types of birds. I mean, I do turkeys, I do meat turkeys, I do meat birds, chickens, and then I do my layers, and it's mobile infrastructure for all of that, except for my fermenting. I need to do that in a warm place in the winter. Where do you do your feed fermenting in the winter?
We do ours in our chicken house, because our chicken house, the birds heat it. Our chicken house is insulated, but it never goes below freezing.
Oh, the chicken house that I'd seen at your parents' place there. Okay, right. Okay, see, mine's not big enough. My chicken house should be, but that doesn't move around, that thing.
That one doesn't. But my new ideal system is I want to move to having. So I've got those mobile chicken tractors, and then I'm just going to pull that into a hoop house or a greenhouse in the wintertime. And they'll overwinter in there. And your lower one, that's kind of just out south of your house, I think would be perfect for some kind of a mobile coop where you just tuck them in there. Richard Perkins does it.
This is what I do now. So because I move my birds around. So I only keep, right now I've got like 25 layers. I brought in some new ones too. So I've got like 14 laying birds right now. I brought in a new 10, and I got a rooster. Those are my layers. And then I do about 40 meat birds. But so in the summertime, my layers are in that red coop that's south of the house. And then the meat birds are in the mobile coop. And I don't know if I had it set up this way when you got here, but I built a pretty sweet mobile coop that's on skid pallets, and I can pick it up from any side.
Oh yeah.
So I can get it right into my greenhouses. So now I built I'm building another high tunnel. So the meat birds move in the mobile one, and I can literally fit 40 birds in that small coop. It's awesome. 40 birds. And because I've got enough roosting area, and it's great for winter because the layers go into that in the winter, but they can withstand really cold. But so in the growing season, I do my meat birds in that coop, and then they move to about 2 to 3 different terraces or garden areas. Then they clean it out, right? And I still need a fucking mobile fencing solution because these electric ones, the chickens get through them and they don't work. So I need something. But anyway, I move that around, and then when I slaughter the meat birds, then the layers go back into that coop, and then I move that coop to a greenhouse, and they stay in that greenhouse all winter. And now I alternate between 2 different high tunnels for those birds. But dude, what is the best mobile fencing solution for chickens?
I mean, I'm moving towards those Aluma coops that I'm selling now. It's like a fixed cage that has like wheels on it. So when you pick up on a handle, it pushes.
I know
the
that
wheel.
shit just doesn't work for me with my
I
topography.
know. And
I
so
need
other than
a
that,
fencing solution. I need a
what
fencing
what
solution.
what kind of fencing are you using? Is it the Premier One or
It's well, it's the Gallagher, the classic
yeah?
electric fencing.
Because
But I'll tell you what
try
I'm
the
doing.
yeah.
What's that?
I was gonna say try the Premier One stuff. I think it's better.
Premier One?
That's they kind of make the best one because I used to use it, and I'm gonna use it this year again with my new setup. But you want to get the shorter distance ones. Like there's some that are like 194 feet. Those are too long. They're too cumbersome. You want you can make it
Okay, yeah, look at this. Hey,
a
shit.
100
Yeah, this
footer.
looks better. Oh, geez.
Is
Chicken
that
net. Oh, this is
okay?
way better. Oh my
You might be
goodness.
using the wrong one.
Oh, I got the
'Cause-
wrong one. All right. But what I've done is because I mean it actually, yeah, it's kind of low for the mature chickens. They'll fly over it all the time,
yeah.
especially if the topography, because my land, there's no really ever that's totally flat. Well, it is when I have the chickens on the garden plots, it is, but there'll be parts they can jump over. And then the
Yeah.
birds that are like my new batch that are just, I don't know, maybe a month old right now, they can go right through it, even with the electric on it. It doesn't matter. So what I've done is I've just put rebar every like 10 feet, and then I took old scrap greenhouse poly and cut it into 2-foot strips so that I got a 2-foot solid area around the bottom that they
Okay.
won't see through and want to go through. And it's working,
Yeah.
but it looks kind of janky, it's
Well, it's not modular. The other thing you might try is get a different breed, get a heavier breed that isn't so flighty, like a buff Orpington or something. Like there's because some birds are
yeah,
just
those buff Orpingtons are lazy, aren't they?
they're more apt to fly around. Like a lot of the leghorns or any of the barred rocks or anything like that. They're just more flighty.
Yeah. Yeah. But even this, I'm looking at the close up of this fencing with the 2-inch on the bottom and 4-inch. They'll get through that 4-inch part.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, you might be right, and that might make sense.
And then the other piece is like training them. Like you might have to like if you've got someone in your flock who knows how to fly over it, they'll train everybody else. So
They do.
you might have to start from scratch
Well,
with
no, you know what I'm doing now is I kill that fucking bird. I'm over it, man. So I hatched out, or one of my hens went broody last spring and hatched out 5 chicks. I was, oh great. So I got these new 5 chicks, and there was 1 rooster and 4 hens, and the rooster turned out to be great,
yeah.
but those fucking hens could always get out. And I built like a permanent fencing. You saw it when you were here around
Yeah.
that main coop area. They get over it. None of the other birds do, but they do. I gave away 2 of those, and I just shot the other 2 at the 22, and I let them die right in. Like I'm a fascist dictator in my with my birds now. It's like you fuck around, you're dead, and you're going to be left to rot, and the skunk is going to come and eat you at night, and all the other hens are going to watch and be terrified that this is what happens when you leave the coop.
Yeah, it takes a while to get them trained. Yeah.
So now they're locked down now. Like
Okay.
I wish I would have done. I have a friend in town here in my area who she's like that too. She's a bit more hardcore. She'll just tear their wings off like right in front of the other birds. Like holy shit!
Geez.
I'd rather just shoot it with a 22,
Yeah.
or So
But
yeah. Anyways,
um,
so what's the next one here?
we did
That,
infrastructure.
that was an infrastructure riff because we started talking about fencing, then that led into talking about animals. So next one is zones of use. And this one is easy to change relatively. Like the next 3 zones of use, soil and aesthetics, are like the easiest to change. Zones of use is important though, because you want to think about how things are laid out on the property. And it mostly just comes down to, your buildings, infrastructure, your gardens, your areas where things happen and where those things go, in accordance to your chore path and how you live on that property, right? So I think it's important, but it's a thing that's pretty easy to change. So usually it's not a deal breaker on a property unless it's ties into poorly placed buildings and infrastructure, as you already noted.
Yeah, like if your house and your shop is already spread out a bunch, or if it, like that can be problematic.
Or a poorly placed pond. You know, people often place ponds in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And sometimes they place them where they have to go because it has to line up with the topography, right? Ultimately.
Yeah.
And then that's where your landform intersects with all of this, is because sometimes that just creates a pond being not the greatest place because it's compromising your infrastructure.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But so zones of use, I don't know what else there is to really say about that one, but
yeah, just like my framework for that is the things that you need the most or that need you the most, you
yes,
put the closest to you,
closest to
and
you.
the things that you need the least or that they need you the least, you put them the furthest away. And the analogy I give is like, if you designed your kitchen where your fridge was on your second story, your stove was in your basement, and your sink was in your garage, you would hate cooking. Like if you had, and
Exactly.
it's only 50 feet of distance, but now scale that up to your yard, and you got to do here for this chore and this to this chore. And the other thing that to kind of drive this home is that the area of a circle is an exponential function to its radius.
Yeah.
So like every step that you go further away from your house, there's exponentially more area of land that you have to manage.
Over
And
time.
so
That's where it really
and
quantifies,
time,
right?
exactly. So it's
Yeah.
beyond exponential, because it's actually super exponential, because it's you've got
Yeah.
up, down, and the time and all this other
Yeah.
stuff. So like I can't overestimate this or the importance of this enough. If you it is low on the priority or the scale of permanence, but fix it right away. Like
Yeah.
bring your shit in, bring your gardens, bring your
Bring it
animals
all
to
in.
you, bring it all
Absolutely.
in.
People, so many guys I've seen over the years put their shop and their greenhouse in the wrong place, where it's
Yeah.
too many fucking steps. And you really notice it in the winter, right? That's when
Yes.
up in Canada, that's when you
Yeah.
really notice it. Or
Yeah.
you know what? I know folks down in Arkansas and Tennessee where it's fucking rainy for a long time. Like it's rainy a lot. And so every step in the pouring rain sucks. So
Yeah.
that's where it's really important too. But yeah, no, totally. Zones of use is key. That all ties in with the chore path, right? And how you exist on the property. Yeah, people put the garden too far away. Especially, because it's important to compartmentalize the garden, right? Like not this hippy dippy fucking throw
Yeah.
seeds all over the
No,
place.
no.
You want to have a kitchen. Every home needs a kitchen garden. And you
Yes.
know what? I actually find the kitchen garden size that's fine for us is one raised bed. So my wife likes to do like have really close to the kitchen is just a bunch of herbs, and
Yeah.
mostly it's perennial herbs.
Yeah.
But right outside of our doorstep is a raised bed that's about 20 by 3 feet, and it's just
Yeah.
all perennial herbs
Yeah.
and lots of volunteers, and it's great. It's kind of a concentrated hippie garden. But then just like 10 more steps away, I've got my hothouse, which is actually my, at least in the cabin context right now, and actually no, it is in the greater context of our, because I have a bunch of different greenhouses here. My hothouse, that high tunnel, is my zone 1 kitchen garden, because the passive solar greenhouse is actually turning out to be more perennials that I want to keep, like zone 9 and zone 10 perennials. Also, you should see my grapes, dude. I have got my grapes in this greenhouse, like 3 years of manicuring has paid off.
Yeah. Okay.
I have got a cluster of grapes every square foot in that greenhouse right now. It's gangbusters. It's unreal. It's paradise now too, because all the shade, like it's the cat's ass right now. I love it. But anyways, so my zone 1 garden is actually my hothouse greenhouse, which is a 16 by 36 foot high tunnel with 3 big raised beds. And it's awesome. It's my annual main garden.
Yeah.
I find it that for my climate, I just prefer that garden to be a greenhouse. life is easier if that
Okay.
garden is just a greenhouse, because
Yeah.
then I don't have to worry about frost.
If your kitchen garden is a greenhouse, you mean?
Yep. Kitchen
Yeah,
garden is a greenhouse.
that's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
All
Okay.
I do, like, so the beauty of that is my season garden, like my garden season was really delayed this year. Like, it's literally a month late or more
Yeah.
on when I could put stuff outside. But I was able to roll with the punches, and basically, like, all my field crops right now, like, I did a massive plant out yesterday. I put out all my squash. I did a whole 2,000 square foot plot. All my squash, melons. I had my beans and peas in there already. But all of that, and all my corn. So
Yeah.
big block. And then I had, prior to that, I had my cabbage and my potatoes out, which are fairly cold hardy, and they actually withstood a couple frosts, and they're fine.
Yeah.
But then my kitchen garden greenhouse is cranking. I've got, my tomatoes are 6 feet tall already, full of fruits, huge amounts of greens, spring onions, carrots, 2 weeks from harvest. It's cranking, right?
Wow.
And then I've got some early herbs in there. I've already got good sized cauliflower in there. Dude, the biochar, big time paid off.
Okay. Yeah.
Big
Okay.
time paid
Cool.
off. Significant difference in the garden this year. But I already had my field onions out too, and all that. And all I'm doing now from this point is I'll plant garlic in another plot in the before end of season. I'm going to do a big block of sunflowers for feed, but mostly my gardens are in the greenhouses because it's just so much easier. I
That's
don't have
interesting.
to worry about stuff, and I always have stuff fresh.
Yeah.
And even and I can roll up the sides so much on this high tunnel that during summer, pretty much now, this just rolled up. The vents are open. It stays totally cool. And I've got automated irrigation on drip and well, no, just drip now, but I have wobblers as well. But that's the key is and two, so again, going to the greenhouses, that greenhouse has no automation except the water, just the timer that turns on for 20 minutes a day every day. And I change that throughout the season a bit. The roll-up sides aren't manual, but it's like 10 steps out the door of the cabin. And it'll be approximately the same. It's actually in proximity to where the house is set up too. I go around the other side to it, but it's just a few steps more. So it's not a big deal. So I'll put the roll-up cranks on that side of the greenhouse when I move into the house.
Yeah.
Right. So I come in from that side and I roll it up, and then it's fine for the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so on, that was a bit of a zones of use rant. But yeah, I mean, my property really illustrates the zones of use quite well, because I've got the intensive stuff in the immediate landing, right? All my greenhouses and my primary greenhouses, the passive solar greenhouse and my hothouse, all there. My shop is my two shops. I have a Quonset, and then I have a little garage. I'm going to build a 3-bay garage, like full 12 feet high ceilings, and then put like an in-law suite above there. That'll be my next building project. But yeah, man, zones of use are key. So next one is soil.
Okay.
And my property had no fucking soil. But I knew, being, the urban farmer, I had been building up soil for 10 years.
Yeah.
Big fucking deal. I'll either bring it in from somewhere, which I was prepared to do, or I just find places to harvest it. And that's the thing that's been a real cool, a permaculture, like what do you call it? A stacking functions for me up here, is that in the pursuit of my water system development, I harvested all of my soil.
Yeah.
Right. So the byproduct of my water systems was soil that I used for build. I had subsoil and topsoil. Put all the topsoil away. Get all the subsoil and even the riprap. I've got like layers of strata of material up here, which is kind of cool about my property. Is the rock is a challenge, but do you know what riprap is?
Yep. Yeah, like large.
Just big, smashed up, crushed rock, which is amazing for building. Amazing. Yeah. I can build up like that. That's what I start with. The low side of any terrace is riprap. And I'll be able to harvest riprap for my entire life, because the build site for my house cost me $27,000 with a 40-ton excavator with a 16,000-pound hammer. This is a highway machine, right?
Yeah.
Hammering. But And then he took all that riprap, and it was 5 times the volume of the house excavation. So I told him to spread it out down, which is great because now I can just get my mini excavator anytime I want, go over there and I just chip away off this corner, and then I can smooth it all out easy when I'm done. But I can just get tons of this stuff and I just queue it up and then get my skid steer and just bail it up to wherever I'm using it. And it's amazing because it's like concrete. Like, I mean, because you can't, if you don't have material like that, you can't really do earthworks on steep inclines. Like you can in Alberta, you can do earthworks till you're blue in the face with huge machines, and you can dig down fucking 20 feet. Totally different game for me. If I want to build up something, I need to build it with material that's rough, the most rough to the most fine in that order. But so I didn't have any soil, but the soil I do have, I got from my waterways, and it's quite good. And now 3 years of building it, and now I've been putting on 4 inches of compost, finished compost, which is basically just mulch. 4 inches of mulch every year on my beds. Then I introduced biochar from a friend, a mutual friend of ours, Lee Martineau, and holy shit, man! In the annuals, day and night different, man. Things are just, and I did what you did. Like I went way over spec.
20,000 pounds to the acre or something. I think that's what I did.
I went way over spec, especially on the annual stuff. Actually, I went less than you on the perennial stuff because Lee said Takota put way too much. You don't need to put that much.
I think it was like, I actually think I burned a few things. Like the plants were almost, even this year, some of the leaves look a little funny.
Yeah, because there is stuff in there, right? It's not just straight biochar. So I actually, I went to spec on the perennial side, but I went over spec on the annual side, and I think that was the magic combination. Because on the and the thing too is annuals are heavy feeders, right? Like compared to perennial stuff, that they pull up from the soil in general.
4 times as much, pretty much.
Yeah, and so because my soil was forest floor soil with sediment water accumulation from snowpack, there's not a lot, there's no ruminant animal digesting in that soil, so it's just not going to be like what you can get. And so my annuals sucked. Like my first year of the garden up here was brutal. Like some of my crops just didn't grow all year. But now the mulching, I'm adding a broad spectrum fertilizer every year, Gaia Green, but it's from a company called Frankia. That's actually it's the same product basically. The guy's son took the business over and changed it. And so I've been adding, rock dust, he's got this, it's like it's a mix of a ton of micronutrients. I've been putting that in. It's a slow release organic stuff every year and just building up that micronutrient profile in the soil. Now I'm starting to see, okay, now my gardens look like the way they used to when I lived in Kelowna and I had my established urban farming gardens that I put years into. But it takes time. But you know what? It's easy to change. You can, it's easier to change on the smaller scale. If you want 10 acres of an orchard, to change 10 acres of soil is pretty expensive. To do an acre of soil for a garden is nothing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We've turned pure clay into just beautiful topsoil just in a few, and even that was on quite large. Like we've got, probably half acre of gardens at our place that were basically clay. And, so yeah, in my framework too, soil's right at the bottom. Like it's not that it's not important. It's just that when you do the right thing, when you get everything else right, the soil builds itself, and it's just effortless. Yeah,
exactly. And the other thing that an observation I've made on soil over the last, I've been doing the farming. I've been doing all this stuff for 15 years now, or is it 15 years? When did I started farming in 2010. So it's 14 years. Is that a thing you can do to build your soil faster that only requires a decision and no input is make sure you're irrigating the right amount on your soil. So you can abuse soil by over or under watering it. And it'd be interesting to see a study on this, but I can tell you from observation of 14 years of gardening and farming and all that, what I've observed is when I irrigate at the right time and the right amount, I get an exponential looking soil improvement, soil quality improvement. But if I'm watering too much or too little, I don't get that improvement. Even if the right amount of organic matter, the right amount of NPK, the right amount of micronutrients and biology is there, without the right amount of water, it's crazy. And because I think I noticed it up here more than I did in the past, because I'm dealing with such subpar soil that perhaps is because it's more vulnerable, is more responsive to lack of or the right amount of elements to it, if you know what I mean. And so it's kind of like, it's like observing starvation or observing hunger on a starvation level versus observing hunger on a light snack level, or the munchies or something. And so, getting your timing right with watering is very important. That's why I like automation with water. Your irrigation systems are so important, and to change them throughout the year. Like for me, I'm right. I need to do a big irrigation timer change right now because I had it. We have our spring in this part of Canada is unlike yours. And actually, you might have had it. We had it similar all this year, but normally for us, April. So like it's starting to, trees are starting to bud in March, and then we're getting a bit of rain coming out of March. But April and the first to second week of May are all dry, no rain. And so I actually have to irrigate quite a bit, especially at the end, near the end of that period. But then about now we get into this rainy period where we get this mixed weather, which is nice because it's warm, and then we get periods of rain throughout the day. And then I got to dial irrigation back. And then when we get into the heat of summer, I got to dial it back up. And then I have to increase the frequency. And for certain parts and certain gardens need more water, certain gardens need less water, and so having a system that's somewhat decentralized, I think is, or not necessarily decentralized, but you can control areas, is very important.
It is. And like, I'm just getting into that on my place. Cause I never grew up, like my parents did kind of dry land farming and gardening, where it's just like, if it rained, great. And if it didn't,
that
sucks. and now that I'm like getting onto just how like it's expensive and it's a bit finicky, but like this year, I bet you I bought 10 different kinds of like sprinklers and different wobbler heads like I'm just, and I'm watching, your videos are actually some of the best ones I've seen on like irrigation systems and ideas for that. And, but it is an absolute game changer. Like I'm funny, I've got my parents hooked onto it now. Like I bought these, big gun irrigations. Like I can do like a 200-foot diameter circle at like 50 gallons a minute because from the water system that I've got. And I was telling my parents about it, and they're like, "Oh, bring yours over here, and you can do our garden." So I got them set up with it now.
50 gallons a minute. Holy shit! It's nice to have. It's nice to have that. It's nice with irrigation. It's key to have a few different applications, at least. A drip and an overhead. And then, your main delivery systems are important too, right? That's one thing I learned from you actually, was going with the 1 1/4 inch prime 100 line as just a delivery line. So key.
Even on my new place, I went with 2-inch on my new place.
Well, you've got, 2-inch. Wow. That's amazing. I've been able to get what I need with 1 1/4 though. Because I'm only distributing water in my main 5 acres, really.
And I got that set up for like long term. I want to be irrigating my pastures and stuff. Like I've got a design system for that'll work pretty good. Okay, what was the last one? Was you said
the last one is aesthetics and experience, and it's like the one to say the least about. But it's funny because it's the thing. Well, what are the two things that realtors focus most on? It's the buildings and infrastructure and the aesthetics and experience. Those are number 8 and 11 on the scales of permanence, which is, I think it is appropriate, because what is it to change that stuff? It's a lipstick renovation, it's a painting of a house, it's
And a bit of,
the fixing of an entrance gate, it's some basic landscaping, it's putting down some concrete on some paths, maybe, or it's stuff like that, and so it's the one that's, yeah, the conversation about the scales of permanence is kind of neat, because when you arrive at this one, this is kind of the least to say, because it's like you've covered everything else.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's important, but it's stuff that's not pertinent to your life on that property in a compounding way, like the other things are, right? Like we talked about how all those other things have a massive compounding effect in the lifestyle, or in the lifetime of your property. And I think that's what's important, overall, to kind of summarize a lot of this stuff, is like thinking about your property in a timeline of, where you want to be eventually, and how, if you get these things right early on, it's going to make the next 20 years a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. I love that. To close out, one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is, if you could go back in time, to the moment where you were just getting into kind of homesteading and farming and stuff like that, and you had 30 seconds to give yourself some advice before you got sucked back into a time machine, what would you tell yourself?
Chill the fuck out. Relax a little bit. Don't get so, don't take yourself so seriously. That's probably what I'd tell my younger self, because that's where I'm at now. I'm totally chill.
Yeah.
I get riled up, as you and I both do when we get excited about things we talk about, but I'm pretty even keel. But I wasn't when I was younger, and I burnt myself. I'm like a fireball. Like I went hardcore, and I still go hardcore, but now that I'm older, I'm going to be 45 this year. Fuck. I can dial it up, and I like, it's like, it speaks to the whole work smarter, not harder. If I would have worked smarter earlier on, I could have saved myself some chronic injuries, that my body sustained. Overall, I'm okay. I'm in pretty good shape. I'm still out. I chop my own firewood. I do the work on the homestead. I still can, and I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to do it for many, many years to come, far above or beyond my children being the age that they could do it too. I want to be chopping firewood when I'm 80.
Yeah.
I want
100%.
Fortunately, I've built enough redundancy into my homestead that if I can't chop firewood, I can turn on the propane. But I want to be able to do these things because, anyways, you gotta, what I would say to my younger self is, chill out a little bit. Don't take things so serious. Don't take yourself so seriously. And, another thing that I've learned really in my more mature years is to think before I react.
Yeah.
So my personality type, have you ever, hey, it's a neat rabbit hole that you could go down thinking about, okay, scales of permanence is a really cool thing to think about, because it's how we compartmentalize and understand all the components of what make a really complex thing easy to understand, is human design. Have you ever checked that shit out?
I've heard about it, but I've never dug deep into it. It seemed like
it's permaculture for personalities.
Okay, is it? Okay.
It's the 11 scales of permanence for personalities. It's super cool.
Really?
I learned a lot about it when I was down at Narcopoco this year, and at Confluence when I was down in San Antonio, Texas. But it's how to think.
That was with Yerasimos?
Yeah, Yerasimos. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So he's got me onto this trip. But anyways, I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but that's because I figured out my personality type is I'm a generator. So there's like There's reflectors, projectors, generators, manifestors, and what's the other one? Anyways, there's these 4 or 5 different personality types. And I understand mine and my children, and man, it's made such a difference in my family dynamic.
Cool.
But also understanding my personality type, because in my personality type, I have this thing that I respond from the gut. And so it's like, and literally every time in my life that I made a mistake that I regretted, it's because I responded right away.
Yeah.
And so what my personality type should do to address this thing is sleep on it.
Yeah.
Just fucking sleep on it.
Yeah.
And so that's actually, you know what? If I were to go back in time, I could say one thing to myself, it'd be fucking sleep on it, buddy. Whenever the thing happened, whether it was for good or bad, because I've been things where something happens that I get really excited about, and I go balls to the walls too quick, and then get in, I bite off more than I can chew, or I get into something that I can't handle, or something happens bad, and I respond and do something terrible. You know, I said something I shouldn't have, or something like that. You know, and so that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. Curtis, man, thanks so much for doing 2 hours with us. That was fantastic.
Shit, it's been 2 hours. Wow. Cool, brother.
Yeah, that was great.
That was a lot of fun.
Okay, folks. All of Curtis's links are going to be in the show notes below. If you're on this, you know Curtis, where to find his stuff. His courses are amazing. You've got how's your homestead course been doing, by the way?
It's good. Yeah, it's been doing really good. We're really trying to front load that one now, because I think it can help a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, it's the thing. It's like, I don't know how sometimes I come up with this shit, but I just like, I remember talking to you, and I was like, I want to teach a course on how to save people all the time that I wasted when I was looking for a property.
Yeah.
And so the neat thing about this course is that it really can help a shitload of people on all kinds of contexts, because it's the first thing that you do before you start your homestead journey is you buy a property. And so many people buy the wrong property because they make some critical analysis mistakes, like we covered in the scales of permanence. And so, I wanted to kind of help people tackle that, because I realized what a complicated and onerous thing it was to do. That, you know, I like to think about things in systems. So I kind of can think about it, have an experience, and then go, okay, like, let's compartmentalize this. And you were certainly a good help in that too, talking to you about some of the things that you were doing in your consulting. But no, the course has been great. People can check it out. Just go to freedomfarmers.com. There's a free web class they can check out where I kind of just show tricks in Google Earth. That's a big, it's a massive free tool that guys like you and I use. That's fucking huge, invaluable. 10 years ago,
free is crazy. Like,
it's crazy. You could not do the type of consulting that you and I do without Google Earth, without traveling to that place or getting high expensive GIS data that just to get would cost a lot of money. Now we can just free willy-nilly go and zoom in on a property in North Carolina, boom, check it out, write it off, or put it on the next list,
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about the course you put together, because you're doing that. Is like a lot of them. I think if people were to take one thing away from this live that we did, if they took nothing else, it's one thing you said right at the beginning was you want to look at like 100 properties, and because even if they're a fail, you're going to learn about, okay, why was it a fail? What is it about this property that wasn't a fit for your context, or was just a threat that wouldn't be a fit for anybody? And then just if you've got a good framework, you want to fail them as quickly as possible and as many as possible. Because if you can buy the right property, even if it takes you 2 years, it may save you half a lifetime of work, millions of dollars. Like, you really can't underestimate the value of buying the right piece of property. And we've scratched the surface of it tonight, but it's a great course. There's tons of insights you're going to get from it.
Totally. Yeah. Hopefully it can help a lot of people out there. So they can check that out. And Yeah, I'm posting on Twitter a bit at Off Grid Stone. On Telegram, people can follow me. If people want to learn more about what I teach with law, I have a whole other side of things I'm doing. I'm doing a lot more work in law now. I don't really talk about it on my public platforms because I don't want to deal with tons of people because the information is so valuable and powerful. But that's a big thing that I've been doing a lot more of these days. Just helping people get freedom, man, because the system is fucking bullshit. And if people take it lying down and just listen to everything that some idiot with a badge says, yeah, you're going to live under tyranny. But the system we actually have is great if you understand some basics, and most of it's voluntary and you just didn't know it. And so, yeah, that's a whole other thing I'm doing these days, which is a lot of fun.
Cool, man.
Cool, brother.
All right. Thanks again, Curtis.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Good chat. Talk to you soon.
Okay. See you, folks.